The lost ticket. The autumn rain pelted against the train station's glass ceiling, creating a symphony of droplets that Priya Sharma found oddly comforting. With her guitar case strapped to her back and a worn leather notebook tucked under her arm, she waited for the delayed evening train, tapping her foot to an invisible rhythm only she could hear. At 24, Priya lived halfway between dreams and reality. By day, she taught music at an underfunded community center. By night, she performed at small venues for audiences that rarely exceeded a dozen people. Tonight had been particularly disappointing. The cafe owner had paid her with a free meal rather than the agreed-upon amount, claiming poor attendance as an excuse. The announcement for the arriving train crackled through the speakers, causing a surge of movement among the waiting passengers. As Priya joined the shuffling crowd, she noticed a leather card case slip from a man's pocket several feet ahead. It landed with a soft thud on the wet platform, immediately soaking up rainwater. "Excuse me?" Priya called out, but her voice disappeared into the station's cacophony. The man continued walking, unaware of his loss. Weaving through the crowd, Priya reached down and retrieved the case. It was expensive looking but worn at the edges, suggesting it was treasured rather than new. She quickened her pace, dodging commuters until she caught up to the tall figure in a charcoal overcoat. "Sir, you dropped this," she said, tapping his shoulder lightly. The man turned, revealing a face etched with worry. When he saw what Priya held, his expression transformed instantly to relief. "My train ticket and portfolio," he breathed, accepting the case with trembling hands. "Thank you. I have an audition with Symphony Productions in 30 minutes. Without this, I'd have nothing to show them." Symphony Productions? Priya couldn't help but be impressed. They were one of the most prestigious music production companies in the country. Dominic Alvarez, he introduced himself, extending a hand, while carefully tucking the case into an inner pocket. "I'm a composer, or trying to be. Priya Sharma." "I'm a musician too," she replied, adjusting her guitar strap. "Good luck with your audition." Dominic checked his watch and his eyes widened. "I need to run. Thank you again. You might have just saved my career." Before Priya could respond, he was gone, darting through the station entrance and disappearing into the rainy evening. She boarded her train moments later, thinking little of the encounter. Acts of kindness were simply part of who she was, small gestures that cost nothing but might brighten someone's day. As the train rumbled through the night, Priya opened her notebook, jotting down lyrics about chance encounters and rainy platforms. She wondered briefly about Dominic Alvarez and his audition, hoping he'd make it in time. Symphony Productions could change his life entirely. Her own train ticket, a monthly pass she could barely afford, was safely tucked in her jacket pocket. Unlike Dominic's leather case, Priya's was made of faded cloth, fraying at the seams, much like her dreams of musical success that seemed to be unraveling despite her talent and dedication. The rain traced patterns on the window as Priya hummed a new melody. Tomorrow would be another day of teaching reluctant students and hunting for gigs that paid in actual currency rather than compliments and free coffee. But for now, she took comfort in having possibly helped another musician's journey, even if her own path remained uncertain. Little did she know that this small act, retrieving a dropped case on a rainy platform, would echo through time, eventually, returning to her in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. Fading melodies. 7 years had transformed Priya Sharma in subtle ways. The optimistic sparkle in her eyes had dimmed slightly, replaced by the quiet determination of someone who refuses to surrender a dream, despite mounting evidence that perhaps she should. At 31, she still performed music, though now at slightly better venues than before, but had supplemented her income with 2 additional jobs, morning shifts at a music store and weekend bartending at a jazz club. Her small apartment walls were lined with rejection letters from record labels, each one carefully preserved as both motivation and painful reminder. The latest edition had arrived just this morning. "While we appreciate your unique sound, we're unable to offer representation at this time." Priya folded the letter precisely along its creases before adding it to the collection. She didn't allow herself to cry anymore, not over these. Instead, she picked up her guitar, fingers automatically finding the chords to her newest composition, one she'd been working on for months but couldn't quite finish. Through her open window came the distant sound of a piano, drifting from the Victorian cottage 3 blocks down. The Willoughby House, as locals called it, had been built in the 1920s by a famous pianist who designed its main room with perfect acoustics. Priya walked past it almost daily, often pausing to imagine what it would be like to create music in such a space. Just dreaming again, she murmured to herself, setting down her guitar to prepare for her evening shift. The Willoughby House had recently appeared on the market after decades of being passed down through the same family. Its asking price might as well have been 1,000,000 stars in the sky for how unreachable it felt to Priya. Still, she'd called the real estate agent. Anyway, pretending to be a serious buyer just to arrange a viewing, standing in that acoustically perfect room had been magical. Priya had sung a single note and heard it resonate in a way that made her skin prickle with goosebumps. The elderly owner, Mrs. Willoughby, had smiled knowingly. "This house needs a musician," she'd said. "It gets lonely without melody." Now, as Priya locked her apartment door and headed to her bartending job, she passed the cottage again. A fresh "for sale" sign had replaced the weather-worn one, and her heart sank when she noticed the word "reduced" stamped across it in bold red letters. Someone would snatch it up soon, and her secret dream would become another impossibility. At the Blue Note Jazz Club, Priya mixed drinks with practiced efficiency while occasionally glancing at the small stage where a quartet played. The owner, Harriet, had been kind enough to let Priya perform during happy hour once a week, though the distracted audience rarely paid full attention. "You've got that look again," Harriet commented, sliding past Priya to grab a bottle of whiskey. "The one where you're 1,000,000 miles away." "The Willoughby House price dropped," Priya admitted. "Someone else will buy it now." Harriet squeezed her shoulder sympathetically. "Maybe it's time to focus on more achievable dreams, honey." Priya nodded automatically but knew she wouldn't. Practical dreams held no magic. And despite everything, she still believed in magic. The kind that transformed ordinary notes into songs that moved people. The kind that might someday transform her life too. That night after her shift, exhaustion weighing her steps, Priya took a detour past the Willoughby House. Its windows were dark, but she could almost hear phantom melodies echoing from within. She'd calculated that with her current income, she'd need to work for approximately 23 more years to afford it. By then, the house would surely belong to someone else. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Another booking. A corporate event that paid well but required her to perform cover songs rather than her original material. Priya accepted it immediately. Every dollar brought her incrementally closer to her dream, however distant. At home, she returned to her guitar and the unfinished song. The missing bridge eluded her, like a word on the tip of her tongue that refused to materialize. Perhaps it was a metaphor for her life, a composition perpetually missing its connecting piece stuck in the same repeating verses without resolution. On her refrigerator, held by a music note magnet, was a flyer for an upcoming showcase at Resonance Hall. The event featured unknown artists performing for a panel of industry professionals, including representatives from several major labels. Priya had applied immediately, submitting her strongest original songs, and against all odds had been selected. 2 weeks remained until her performance, possibly her last real chance to be discovered. If this failed, perhaps Harriet was right about focusing on achievable dreams. The thought created a heaviness in her chest that even music couldn't lift. As sleep finally claimed her, Priya dreamed of performing in the Willoughby House, its perfect acoustics carrying her voice out into the world. In the dream, someone important was listening, someone who could change everything. But his face remained in shadow, just beyond recognition. The benefactor's return. The Resonance Hall showcase loomed just 3 days away, and Priya found herself obsessively rehearsing during every spare moment. Her fingers were calloused and sore, her voice slightly hoarse from overuse. This opportunity felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, one last chance to soar or fall. Tonight's performance, At the Blue Note was supposed to be a final practice run with a live audience. Harriet had generously given her the prime Friday night slot, replacing the regular jazz quartet who'd agreed to back her up for 2 songs. Priya arrived early, nervously adjusting the microphone stand, while the quartet warmed up behind her. "We've got a special performer tonight," Harriet announced to the half-filled room. "Our very own Priya Sharma with some original material." A smattering of polite applause followed as Priya stepped forward, her vintage sundress catching the dim stage lights. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to sing. The first notes emerged tentatively, but as the song progressed, Priya felt herself surrendering to the music. This particular composition about holding on to dreams despite the world's indifference was her most personal, laying bare vulnerabilities she rarely showed. By the final chorus, even the patrons who had been chatting fell silent, glasses paused midway to lips. When she finished, the silence lasted a beat too long before erupting into genuine applause. Priya opened her eyes, blinking against the lights, and noticed something unusual. A man in the back corner had stood up, his focus entirely on her. Something about his posture triggered a distant memory. After finishing her 3-song set, Priya headed to the bar for water, her throat parched from singing. Harriet handed her a glass with a knowing smile. "Someone's asking about you," she said, nodding toward the back corner. "Fancy suit, expensive watch. Says he knows you." Priya turned, curiosity piqued, and found herself face to face with the man who had been watching so intently. Recognition dawned slowly, the same strong jawline, now adorned with a neatly trimmed beard, the same intense eyes though they carried different shadows now. "Dominic?" she asked hesitantly. "Dominic Alvarez." His smile confirmed it before his words did. "You remember me. I wasn't sure you would. It was a brief encounter 7 years ago." "The train station," Priya nodded. "The portfolio case for Symphony Productions." "That very one," he replied, his voice carrying the smooth confidence of success. "May I?" He gestured to the empty bar stool beside her. As he sat down, Priya noticed subtle signs of wealth, the tailored suit, the platinum cufflinks, the air of someone accustomed to being listened to. Life had clearly taken very different paths for them since that rainy evening. "Your performance was extraordinary," Dominic said, signaling Harriet for 2 drinks. "Your voice has a quality that's rare, authentic emotion without manufactured drama." "Thank you," Priya replied, unsure how to navigate this unexpected reunion. Did your audition go well? That day, I mean." Dominic laughed softly. "It changed everything. The documents you saved contained not just my composition but irreplaceable letters of recommendation. Symphony Productions signed me that evening." He paused, studying her. "I looked for you afterward, you know. Wanted to thank you properly. But I only had your name." The jazz quartet had started playing again, providing a soundtrack to this surreal conversation. Priya learned that Dominic had risen through the ranks at Symphony, eventually becoming their youngest executive producer. 3 years ago, he'd launched his own label, Meridian Records, which specialized in discovering unconventional talents, overlooked by mainstream companies. "And you?" he asked. "Your music is too good to be hidden in a jazz bar." Priya gave him the abbreviated version of her struggles, careful not to sound self-pitying. "I'm performing at Resonance Hall this Monday," she added, "a showcase for industry professionals." "I know," Dominic replied with a slight smile. "I'm on the panel." Priya nearly choked on her drink. "You're what?" "Meridian Records always participates. I review all the applications personally." His eyes held hers steadily. "I recognized your name immediately, though I couldn't be certain it was the same Priya Sharma. The coincidence felt too perfect to be real." Priya's mind raced with implications. Was this an advantage, or would it create impossible expectations? Am I away? "Not telling you this to make you nervous," Dominic continued, seeming to read her thoughts. "Quite the opposite. I believe in musical integrity above all else. Your submission stood entirely on its own merit." They talked for hours as the club gradually emptied around them. Dominic spoke about the industry with candid insight, sharing stories about artists he'd discovered in unlikely places, a janitor with perfect pitch, a delivery driver who composed symphonies between routes. When Harriet finally flashed the lights for closing time, they moved their conversation outside. The night air was cool against Priya's skin as they walked without particular destination. "Would you show me where you create your music?" Dominic asked suddenly. Priya hesitated, embarrassed by her modest apartment with its thin walls and noisy neighbors. "It's nothing special. The best music rarely comes from perfect environments," he replied. "It's born from necessity and passion." Their path had unconsciously led them toward the Willoughby house, its Victorian silhouette illuminated by moonlight. Priya stopped gazing at it with undisguised longing. "That's where I wish I created music," she admitted. "The Willoughby house. It was built by a pianist with perfect acoustics in the main room." She laughed softly, embarrassed by the confession. "Silly dream." Dominic studied the house with newfound interest. "Dreams aren't silly," he said quietly. "Not when they're what keep you going." As they parted ways that night, Dominic promised to see her at the showcase. Walking home alone, Priya felt strangely energized despite the late hour. Perhaps it was the validation of having someone like Dominic appreciate her music, or maybe it was simply the cosmic symmetry of their reconnection. Either way, for the first time in years, Priya slept without dreaming of what might have been. Instead, she dreamed of what might still be. Harmonious surprise. Monday evening arrived with the crisp energy of autumn. Priya stood backstage at Resonance Hall, clutching her guitar case with white knuckles while the performer before her received polite applause. Through a gap in the curtains, she could see the industry panel, 5 people seated behind a long table, including Dominic, who appeared focused and professional in a charcoal suit. "Priya Sharma, you're up next," the stage manager whispered, clipboard in hand. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she stepped onto the stage, momentarily blinded by the lights. The audience was larger than she'd anticipated, perhaps 200 people, with the panel's table positioned centrally at the back. Priya settled onto the stool, adjusted her microphone, and began to tune her guitar with trembling fingers. "Good evening," she said, her voice carrying more confidence than she felt. "I'm Priya Sharma, and this first song is called Borrowed Light." As she played the opening chords, Priya felt the familiar sensation of music dissolving her anxiety. By the second verse, she had forgotten about the panel, the audience, the stakes. There was only the song and the emotions it carried. When she finished, the applause seemed distant, as though filtering through water. She performed 2 more songs, each more personal than the last. During her final piece, the unfinished composition she'd been struggling with for months, something unexpected happened. The missing bridge suddenly appeared in her mind, fully formed, as though it had been waiting for this precise moment to reveal itself. Without hesitation, Priya followed this new musical path, her voice soaring through the perfect resolution she'd been seeking for so long. When she finished, the silence was absolute before erupting into the loudest applause of the evening. Even in the bright stage lights, Priya could see Dominic leaning forward, an unreadable expression on his face. Backstage, various performers congregated, exchanging nervous smiles and whispered assessments of their performances. A representative informed them that the panel would deliberate over the next 3 days, with results emailed by Thursday. Priya packed her guitar with methodical care, mentally replaying her performance and analyzing every note. "You found your bridge," a familiar voice observed. She turned to find Dominic standing in the narrow hallway, hands casually tucked into his trouser pockets. "It just came to me," Priya admitted. "Right there on stage. The best musical solutions often arrive when we stop forcing them," he replied with a knowing smile. "You were extraordinary tonight, Priya, not just technically. Anyone can learn technique, but you made people feel something." "Thank you," she said, genuinely touched by the compliment. "I have a proposition for you," Dominic continued. "Though it might seem unusual. Are you free tomorrow morning? Around 10, Priya had a shift at the music store, but she nodded anyway. I can be. Excellent. There's something I'd like to show you. He handed her a business card with an address written on the back. Meet me here? It won't take long. The address seemed vaguely familiar, but Priya couldn't immediately place it. Is this about the showcase results? In a way, Dominic replied cryptically. It's about possibilities. The next morning, Priya called the music store with an excuse about a family emergency, something she'd never done before. The address led her to a tree-lined street she knew well, her daily walking route. As she approached the specified location, confusion gave way to recognition. The address belonged to the Willoughby house. Outside stood Dominic, conversing with a woman who appeared to be a real estate agent, judging by her blazer and portfolio. They both turned as Priya approached. Perfect timing. Dominic smiled, extending his hand in greeting. Priya, this is Jessica Wells. She's been helping me with a recent acquisition. Pleased to meet you, Jessica said warmly. Mr. Alvarez has told me about your musical talent. I'm looking forward to the tour. Tour, Priya echoed, thoroughly confused. Dominic's eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement. Shall we go inside first? They entered through the ornate front door into the Willoughby house's famous main room. Priya gasped audibly. The space had been transformed since her viewing weeks ago. The dusty furniture was gone, replaced by a stunning grand piano in the center. Along one wall stood professional recording equipment, mixing boards, monitors, microphones on elegant stands. What is this? Priya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. This, Dominic said, gesturing around the room, is Meridian, Record's newest satellite studio. And, he paused, reaching into his jacket pocket to withdraw a set of keys. Your new home if you want it. Priya stared at the keys, uncomprehending. I don't understand. Jessica tactfully excused herself to take a call outside, leaving them alone in the acoustically perfect room. 7 years ago, you saved more than just my portfolio case, Dominic explained, his voice echoing slightly in the space. You saved my future. Without those documents, I would have missed the opportunity that built my entire career. He ran his hand along the piano's polished surface. I've been looking for a way to thank you properly ever since. By buying me a house? Priya's legs felt weak. That's too much. I can't accept this. It's not just for you, Dominic clarified. It's an investment in your talent. The downstairs is yours to live in. The main level becomes a functional recording studio for Meridian, with you as our first signed artist, if you accept our offer, that is. Priya's mind struggled to process his words. Signed artist? The panel was unanimous about your performance last night. We typically deliberate for days, but in your case, there was no need. Dominic held out a formal envelope. Inside is Meridian, Record's offer for a 3-album contract, along with the deed to the lower level of this house, which would be yours regardless of whether you sign with us. Tears welled in Priya's eyes as the magnitude of the moment crashed over her. Her dream home, a recording contract, and the vindication of years of perseverance, all arriving simultaneously through an act of kindness she'd nearly forgotten. This is impossible, she whispered. No more impossible than a dropped portfolio case leading me to the most authentic musical voice I've heard in years, Dominic replied softly. Sometimes the universe has a way of completing its own compositions. Priya moved to the center of the room, feeling the perfect acoustics embrace her. She hummed a single note and heard it resonate throughout the space, pure and true. In that moment, standing in the house she'd dreamed of for years, Priya realized that some melodies weren't fading after all. They were simply waiting for the right moment to be amplified. New compositions. Spring sunlight streamed through the bay windows of the Willoughby house, casting geometric patterns across the polished hardwood floor where Priya sat cross-legged with her notebook. 6 months had transformed both the house and its owner. The once empty rooms now breathed with life, vintage rugs softening footsteps, walls adorned with framed vinyl records and musical memorabilia, potted plants thriving in sunny corners. Upstairs, the recording studio had become a creative sanctuary. Currently, Dominic stood at the mixing board, headphones partially covering his ears as he adjusted levels on Priya's latest recording. She watched him from the doorway, still occasionally struck by the surreal nature of their partnership. Her debut album, titled Borrowed Light, had been released 2 months ago to critical acclaim. Music critics praised its raw authenticity and haunting melodies, while industry insiders marveled at Meridian Records' discovery of such a unique voice. What none of them knew was how perfectly circular their story had become, how a small kindness had rippled through time to create something neither could have imagined. "I think we've got it," Dominic announced, removing his headphones. "That bridge transition is perfect now." Priya smiled, remembering how that particular musical passage had eluded her for months until the showcase performance. "Let me hear it." Dominic played back the recording, and Priya closed her eyes to listen without visual distraction. Her voice filled the acoustically perfect room, accompanied by subtle instrumentation that complemented rather than overwhelmed her lyrics. When the bridge arrived, that once missing piece, goosebumps rose on her arms. "It's ready," she agreed when the track ended, "for the second album." Though their professional relationship had blossomed naturally, their personal connection had developed with more caution. Both carried histories of prioritizing career over connection. Dominic through years of single-minded ambition, Priya through necessity and survival. Yet something undeniable had been growing between them, carefully nurtured, but never directly acknowledged. Their daily routine had fallen into comfortable rhythms. Mornings began with coffee on the wraparound porch, discussing musical ideas or industry news. Afternoons were devoted to recording sessions or meetings with other Meridian artists. Evenings often found them sharing simple meals in Priya's downstairs apartment, which she decorated with colorful textiles and secondhand treasures. Tonight was different, however. Priya had invited Dominic to dinner to celebrate a milestone. Her album had just been certified gold, an achievement neither had anticipated so quickly. She had prepared her grandmother's recipe for butter chicken, filling the house with aromatic spices. The dining table, a vintage find from a local antique shop, was set with mismatched china and flickering candles. "Something smells amazing," Dominic commented, appearing at her apartment door precisely at 7. Priya welcomed him in, accepting the bottle of champagne he offered. "I thought we deserved something special tonight." As they ate, conversation flowed easily between professional discussions and personal revelations. Priya shared stories of her childhood in a musical family where instruments crowded their small home but money for formal lessons was scarce. Dominic spoke of his immigrant parents who had worked multiple jobs to fund his early musical education, believing in his talent long before anyone else did. "I never properly thanked you," Priya said suddenly, setting down her glass. "Not just for the house and the contract, but for hearing something in my music when no one else seemed to." "You thanked me years ago," Dominic replied, "on a rainy platform when you returned my future to me." He hesitated, then added softly, "Though I've often wondered if it was really chance that put you there that day." After dinner, they migrated to the main room where the grand piano stood bathed in moonlight. Without discussion, Dominic sat at the bench while Priya perched beside him. His fingers found the keys, beginning a melody she recognized as one they'd been working on together, a duet neither had been brave enough to call what it truly was, a love song. Priya began to hum along, then added lyrics that had come to her just that morning. Words about coincidence and destiny, about kindness returning. In unexpected ways, about two creative souls finding resonance in each other. When the impromptu performance ended, the final notes lingered in the perfect acoustics, neither willing to break the spell with speech. Finally, Dominic turned to face her fully. "I've been thinking about expanding Meridian," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "Opening a second location, perhaps in another city." Priya felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. "You'd be leaving?" "Not exactly." His gaze held hers steadily. "I'd need a partner to run this location, someone who understands music from the inside out, who can recognize authentic talent because they embody it themselves. A business partner? Priya clarified, her heart accelerating. Dominic's hand found hers on the piano bench. Among other types of partnership, if you're interested. The moment stretched between them waited with possibility. Outside, a gentle rain had begun to fall, tapping against the windows in a rhythm that seemed to echo the one they'd been composing together all these months. I think, Priya said carefully, that the best compositions often begin with a simple melody that develops into something more complex over time. She turned her hand to intertwine her fingers with his, and I'm very interested in what we might create together. Dominic smiled, relief and joy transforming his features. Then perhaps we should start writing that next movement. In the year that followed, the Willoughby House became more than just a studio and residence. It transformed into Meridian Records' flagship location, with a reputation for discovering artists other labels overlooked. Priya's second album earned a Grammy nomination, and her production work helped launch several promising careers. But the most meaningful composition remained the one she and Dominic created together. A life built on mutual respect and shared passion, on professional collaboration and personal connection. The historic house, once merely a distant dream viewed from sidewalks, had become the setting for a story neither could have written alone. On particularly clear evenings, they still sat on the porch together, sometimes in companionable silence, sometimes eagerly discussing new musical directions. Occasionally they reflected on the remarkable coincidence that had connected them: a dropped portfolio case, a rainy platform, a moment of simple kindness. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't seen your case fall?" Priya asked one such evening, her head resting on Dominic's shoulder. "I don't believe it would have changed our story," he replied thoughtfully. "Perhaps delayed it, complicated it, but not prevented it entirely." "Why is that?" Dominic pressed a kiss to her temple before answering. "Because some melodies are simply meant to be heard together. The universe keeps playing them until someone finally recognizes the harmony. And in the perfect acoustics of their shared home, that harmony continued to resonate, growing richer and more complex with each passing day, a composition neither had imagined but both now recognized as their greatest work.